Welcome, everyone. I'm Anodea Judith, and this is Michael Wayne, and we've been doing Voices for the Future for the last couple of years, interviewing people that have a unique take on something they are offering to create a more positive future. And I couldn't be more delighted than to be interviewing today my longtime dear friend, Gary Malkin, who is just a brilliant musician, composer, thinker, evolutionary activist, community contributor, creator, writer. What more can I say? But I will say a more formal bio here, that Gary is a multiple Emmy Award-winning composer, performer, public speaker whose work redefines the role of music as a transformational resource to integrate emotional and spiritual intelligence into the fabric of our lives. He's worked with many of the world's most leading thought leaders, including Deepak Chopra, Lynne Twist, Bob Proctor, Desmond Tutu, Elisabeth Kubler Ross.
Anodea Judith.
There I am on the list too. Gary's passion to create aesthetic ways to face life's transitions with more gratitude and grace is evidenced in his globally acclaimed listening resource, Graceful Passages, which is a wonderful CD. And that's supported nearly 1 million people to accept life's losses with greater compassion and acceptance. That was something to play when people are in the transitioning from life to death, right? Graceful Passages.
Well, we'll talk about it because Ram Dass says it's really for all of the rest of us.
Okay. For the last 40 years, Gary's been composing and producing music for all forms of media, including most recently Netflix's new production of the television series Unsolved Mysteries and the groundbreaking documentaries Thrive 1 and 2, which have been seen by nearly 100 million people in 28 languages. Beautiful score you did on those movies. Oh. He and his collaborative team are currently finishing a Broadway musical called Can You Hear Me, Baby, which I got to sit on an old rehearsal for a couple of years ago, and all about the power of birth, bonding, and the miracle of life, and the importance of supporting women's innate wisdom. He's a contributing author for the best-selling Womb to Thrive about new trends towards birthing a new humanity. And Gary's a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle and the Association for Transformational Leaders, frequently featured on global webinars and interviews, and has his website, wisdomoftheworld.com. That's a lot. Let's get started.
It's so great to be with you, and it's nice to meet you, Michael.
Yeah, wonderful, Gary.
Oh, we're delighted to have you. So let's dive in. We're going to talk. Well, tell us what you want to talk about today. And if you sum it up, what's the passionate edge for you today?
You know, I had a realization in the pool yesterday. I'm doing laps for the first time and getting myself in shape. And I had this thought that we live in a culture that has gone really good at subjugating the intelligence of the body, the heart, and the soul. And that means that we've got really good at eradicating the heart and the body and the soul in our main engagement, you know? And so I'm passionate about I believe that music has a destiny to fulfill in reweaving the importance of our heart, body, soul intelligence as equal jewels in the crown of human intelligence, right? So music has more than a role to play than entertainment, and I call it entertainment, but it has a coagulating role to play in restoring our heart's intelligence back into the integrated with our intellectual rational thought. So I'm on a passionate purpose to integrate that in every sector of humanity, right? Not just the ones that are all touchy-feely woo-woo.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that entertainment. Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, Gary. So tell me little backstory in terms of when did this realization come to you about music as a transformational force? Were you born, not born, but in an early age, were you musically inclined and then also started going in that direction of that integration, or did it come over the years?
I used to have an answer to this that talked about when I was 5 years old. I was at a friend's house and I saw this box. I never saw it before. And I touched the key and all of a sudden this sound came back. And I remembered liking it to Dorothy coming out of the tornado-strewn house and coming and opening up into a cinemascope, Technicolor reality. And that's true. I touched the piano. I felt a melody. I played it. I felt it was missing. So I played harmony. I instantly played. And my mother, who came to pick me up, was dumbfounded and said, get the kid a piano, right? But I have a different perspective now, which is in the last 2 years, I've done a lot of deep implicit memory from my trauma of my birth, as well as in the womb, as well as after. And I've done some remarkable work with a healer named Barbara Carlson, Cosmic Regenesis. And what I've realized was that touching the piano at 5 was my first moment where I had an experience of something holding me, some presence that held me, that gave back to me, where I was in a family where there was just no, dysfunctional Jewish family with no boundaries. And my particular sensitive soul, I was going down, and then the piano came and it saved my life. Honestly, it gave me a sense of a texture, a presence, a reliable sanctuary that was all about listening to something that had something to do with magic. And that's how it started very early on. And then I wore my heart on my sleeve with Broadway musicals and playing in the family gatherings constantly. And unfortunately, my ego got pretty wrapped up in all this attention, which is one of the reasons why I went into Indian classical music when I was 20. But that's another story. Bottom line is, music's been a part of my life, and it's really saved my life from the very beginning, from 5 years old on.
And I can tell you that Gary can walk into a room and sit down at the piano and absolutely transform the energy in a minute and bring everyone together like no one I have ever seen, just kind of commanding that force and bringing us all into our hearts. Yeah. And we're going to hear some of your music on this call today too, right?
Yeah, of course. And it's my favorite thing. I've often said, if I could make a living leading a sing-along and bringing people together in a unified field of heart coherence, man, I love doing it. And thank you, Anodea. That's so sweet of you to say.
Yeah. Who are some of your own musical influences?
Peter Gabriel, Keith Jarrett, Bela Bartok, Igor Stravinsky, Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland. The latter two are the most significant. When I was young, I wanted to be Leonard Bernstein. I wanted to be on stage and concert music and musicals and film and theater, And Aaron Copland, before Aaron Copland turned to 12-tone music, I loved his Americana music. It really spoke to me. And there is something about the American experiment also, just as a meme, that it's not just Aaron Copland's music. There's something about the American dream that has been identified in a sound that is purely American. And that just grabs me. It's been a big influence in my life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, let's get into some of the questions that you sent us to talk about. And we are all about where we're going in the future and the evolution. And so what do you feel is the most important challenge for humanity at this time?
God, well, I alluded to it at the beginning, right? And I have a talk that I've given to healthcare conferences all over the world called "What Does the Future of Healthcare Sound Like?" And why I focus a lot on healthcare is because they're the canary in the mine on where our real attention needs to be. Because at one point in their life, each and every one of us is going to be attended by a healthcare professional at some point. And we're going to want those healthcare professionals to not be burnt out and to want to be really connected to the heart and soul of what they're doing, which is profound work, being of service to us when we're at our most vulnerable and our most frightened, really, right? So I'm very focused on bringing using music as a tool to wake us up to a deeper level of care that allows healthcare providers to be resourced and connected. And the work of Jean Watson, the famous international, multi-degreed nursing theorist who's known the world over as being one of the most spiritual, if you would, but really the most successful nursing theorist in bringing restorative function and heart coherence into the role of nursing, right? I've spoken at a lot of her conferences. She represents the future of healthcare to me, right? And to me, healthcare, as I said, is really important. But I think that everything comes down to a grounding and an integration of our heart wisdom in all the choices we make. And I it's hard to get people to slow down to just listen, right? So how it continues to be, I'll play you something that's an example of one of the efforts that my dear collaborator of mine and I have created to try to corral people's fragmented attention right at the very beginning of a Zoom call. In fact, hey, how about if I share it? You want me to share it?
Why don't we do that right now? That's great.
It's 2 minutes. And it's a perfect example, actually, because what we're trying to do is recognize that everyone, in order to live in this culture, is basically fragmented. And because you can't not be, right? Unless you have no cable television, you live in nature completely. And, most people are fragmented, right?
And you don't have a phone.
Right,
And
exactly.
You don't have a phone.
Yeah. And so, Sarah McCrum is a beautiful evolutionary leader member as well. And she and I, for World Unity Week last year, said, well, what if we could create an entrainment tool? And the term entrainment is used in music as music and healing, which entrains vibrational frequencies. Entraining is like when you breathe with someone and then suddenly you feel naturally wanting to breathe with them, right? So what happens between us, our hearts, our souls, and others on the field of the Zoom call that we're on right now? How does it shift our relationship and align our frequencies to the unified field and to the ability for us to feel like we're on the same page emotionally, right? And how does that change our conversations? So this is one of 10 transformances that we created, and many of them are much longer than this, but we thought, how can we drill it down to really short, 2 minutes, right? 2.5 minutes.
Okay, let's hear it.
So here we go. Just so what I encourage you to do is just take a deep breath and allow the beauty of the images and the words and the spoken word just be like a meditation.
You are invited to experience unity. It's time to put aside the differences that divide us. And embrace the beauty of each one of us being different, being unique, being ourselves. In the essence of who we truly are. A beautiful array of human beings across the planet. So many different ways of being human. So let us get to know each other. Let's spend time with each other. Let's learn from each other. And let's open our hearts to each other. And let's find the unity that exists right in the middle of the richness of our diversity. We are human. We are unique. We are one.
Lovely. You're muted, Gary.
Yeah, I needed that.
I think we all
Yeah.
How the pace of it, what it does is it slows everything down. And that's in the answer to your question, like what am I most really seeing as the necessary trim tab for consciousness being infused in a higher frequency on this planet, has to do with allowing our natural innate abilities to come back into a wholeness and coherence with ourselves. And that happens when we slow down. It naturally happens as naturally as when you cut yourself and a healing process starts to happen. It's this magical integrating capacity that human beings have when we slow down to the presence of the present moment. And I think extraordinary times require extraordinary measures, and I think the extraordinary measures allowing the universal language of human emotion, music, play its role in awakening us to the remembrance of who we really are and what matters most.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about for me.
Yeah.
You have a wonderful song. Do you remember who you are?
I do.
Yeah. So Gary, you use a term I'd never heard it before, vibrational intelligence. So I wonder if you could say what the meaning and necessity of cultivating vibrational intelligence is.
I love that you asked that question. First of all, I want to acknowledge the woman that created the term is Eve Constantine, who's a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle. And when she came up with it and told me about it, I was like, "What did you just say? What? Excuse me?" And it means something similar to both of us, but I've taken it into it's one of the contenders of the title of my upcoming book, if I ever finish it in this lifetime. And we live in a time, you guys, that I know that you know this more than most, where the options have gotten beyond our capacity to track and intellectually.
That's right.
Our frontal lobe cannot track all the untruths and the different agreements on what facts are and all of the above that we know about in a world that we're today. What we can rely on is the capacity when you entrain at the level I was talking about before, and that innate integration happens. What happens is we start to cultivate what I call vibrational intelligence, which is the capacity to sense with your intuition and your gut and all the brains that you have, body, mind, heart, and soul, resonance, and whether you resonate with a frequency or not. So when you walk into a room and there's somebody there that's just like, I just don't want to be near that person. Or you walk and you see a television show or a movie, it's just not landing, On a certain level, when we can start to recognize that it's our ability to feel the frequency, it's like, David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. We need to develop ourselves to sense a frequency of whether it's higher or lower, and whether it resonates with us or not, whether it calls us into resonance to find out more, all that stuff. That is closer to intuition that guides us, like an internal guiding system that is much more dimensional and complex and effective than any intellectual sorting we could ever do, right?
That's
I
right.
know it's kind of funny because I'm talking, I don't know you as well, Michael, but I know Anodea, and I am having the great honor and privilege of talking to one of my mentors and heroes and beloved goddesses that I adore. So when I talk about the world according to me, and I'm talking to you Anodea, it's kind of like,
Oh, no, I understand. Well, when you speak about this vibrational intelligence, I wonder if you would weigh in on something for me that I hear all the time in the New Age circles that I often find myself in, of upping your frequency, right? And to me, I would not want to go to an orchestra that had only flutes and piccolos.
well, and
What
you can't whistle a symphony, right?
No. So, upping the frequency, going to a higher frequency, which is a higher pitch, technically, you know, does it seems to me more resonance. And that's what you're talking about. I want to go to an orchestra that's playing well together and has rich cello and bass and trombone and flutes and piccolos and violins. And, I want the full, and I want it to be in resonance. So that's really, so could you speak to that? Because I
Yeah.
hear this all the time
Okay.
in New Age circles.
Yeah, I have a great analogy for this, by the way. When Michael Stillwater and his wife Doris and I were creating what I'm most known for in the consciousness world, Graceful Passages, I had done everything with synthesized orchestras, and it was technically done. And Michael was really urging me to get it out there because we thought it would get it done in a year. It took us 3 years and 2,000 hours. And I knew in my bones that if I kept the synthesized strings, that it would not have a long shelf life because it didn't have the vibrational integrity of humans with their skin and their sweat and their guts and it's all in there energetically, right? In the art. And I wanted real human beings playing a real 80-piece orchestra. And I plunked down the $80,000 it took to do that in 3 days. It was quite a thing. But the analogy is here. The quality of your musicianship that went into that recording because of 80 musicians all gathering together for one purpose. It was similar to the difference between, you know about a heart rate,
Yeah.
but what about heart rate variability rate is about the nature of the rate, right? It's the nature of the line. To me, raising frequency, the way I'm talking about it, is that analogy of the quality of the coherence, the quality of the presence, the quality of the integration of all the dimensions possible. That is raising the frequency because now we're tapping into the quantum unified field. We're portals of spirit that are able to deliver something that isn't just literally about frequency, literally the way you talked about going in higher instruments. It's really in a way going lower, higher, raising the frequency is bringing it down into the groundedness with the Schumann resonance of the earth, So it's funny. I know what you mean. I never really thought about that, but it's an oxymoronic thing. But it's the quality of the presence that I'm referring to as the raising of frequency.
Uh-huh. That reminds me what you were just saying, Gary, and that was that was good that you brought that up, Anodea, about what do you call upping your frequency?
Raising your frequency.
Right. Raising the frequency, because it reminds me of the ideas that come from complexity theory, that the Santa Fe Institute were some of the first places that really delved into that, kind of an offshoot from chaos theory. And complexity theory, the ultimate goal or the final stage is what is called emergence, that what emerges, the new, from that resonance, from that vibrational intelligence. For instance, I practice Chinese medicine. The literal definition of the word qi from the pictogram is vapors that come off rice when they're cooking. So it's like there's all this vibrational energy, and then the vapors arise. So it's like,
Wow.
So that's really what it's not uploading whatever your frequency, but really creating emergence. And I think any of us, when we're at a musical performance, when there's so much resonance, it just we feel it, as you talk about, Gary, that heart resonance or that vibrational intelligence. So
You
Yeah.
know, this is the reason why I'm obsessed with setting spoken word to music, because I feel like the greatest challenge of our time, as I said at the very beginning, is a hyper focus on linear rational engagement as the only credible way to humans to engage with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could create a tool that allows people to practice not only listening cognitively, but speaking cognitively in a simultaneous way, being wrapped around in the musical language of the heart, then it embodies this wonderful quote that is spoken by one of my dear friends, the integrative oncologist, Dr. Jeremy Geffen, who has this fabulous quote when he was one of the few oncologists who insisted on giving people with cancer, serious cancer, the Graceful Passages tool to deal with their fear around dying so that their immune response wouldn't be crippled by their fear of dying, right? So to relax their fear of dying, to allow their immune system to rise to the occasion, right? And that's one of the uses of Graceful Passages, actually. But I said, why is it that you're like the only oncologist? Nobody else wants to mention the D word in their doctor offices because there's too much cleanup to do. The moment you mention anything about dying when you have cancer, it's all about, we'll fight this, right? And he said, well, because true healing is focused action and intention wrapped in the arms of surrender.
Ah, beautiful.
And that's what I'm talking about, is focused action and intention is the medical science wrapped in the absolute knowing that no one has any idea how or where, when or if you'll be healed. No one knows. And that's that je ne sais quoi energy of vibrational intelligence wrapped in the arms of the heart coherence and surrender. And I think music can be designed for this purpose, literally to shift world leaders before they agree upon carving Europe into different countries, or scientists who are about to talk about AI and whether we're going to integrate the best of humanity or just what our linear rational thinkers have done. I mean, there's a lot of big decisions that are being made that might not be coming from an integrated, emotional and spiritually balanced place. And I think music has a role to play. Like, have you noticed, I'm supposed to shut up now, and I will, but I'll say one more thing. Have you noticed, like, in 3 minutes, you can play a piece of music, and it'd be nice to play something purely musical. Oh, I know which one to play. Actually, I have a 4-minute piece that would work really well for this. But what I say is it irrigates the space with heart presence. And so 3 or 4 minutes of music lasts for about 60 to 90 minutes before things start to feel a little dry. You know, have you ever felt that in a gathering or a conference or a workshop where people are yada, yada, yadaing themselves to death? And what you do when you put something musical that's designed to get here, right? Finally, we're feeling again, you know. So sorry, I went on a little long.
It brings us into a resonant field with each other, and it brings us into heart coherence with each other, which is what Heart Math talks about a lot.
Or the experience of unity of consciousness that people experience at a concert, even if it's, you know, Matthews, Grateful Dead, or, you know, whoever.
Right.
Yeah, that's really awesome. It reminds me of a quote. I sent you this quote earlier, Gary, so I don't know if you saw it, but it was from John Coltrane, the
famous saxophone player, composer.
Yeah, and you know, wrote "A Love Supreme," one of the most brilliant pieces ever. But he said, "I think music is an instrument. It can create the initial thought patterns that can change the thinking of the people." So I'm wondering if you might want to expound on Coltrane's words of music creating the initial thought patterns that can change the thinking of people.
Well, I would semantically challenge the way he talks about it, because it's basically saying what we're talking about, which is instead of challenging the thought patterns, it's actually shifting the locus of attention from the heart being the container of all things, including our thoughts, rather than the frontal lobe being the focus of the lexus of attention that finds a place for the heart. You know, it doesn't work that way, right? And our goal, I think all of our goals, is to find everything we're doing and how can we do it with heart. with a heart awareness, with a heart center, with a heart basis? How can we do it all with being grounded to Earth's energies and Earth's? How can we do it all with a sense of spiritual connection to the fact that we're just a drop in the ocean, right? These are all humbling forces that change who we are into being more humble portals of heart and soul and spirit, rather than egoic representations of powerful beings, you know? So I liked what he said, but I think it's evolved into something even greater, which is this multidimensional way of being.
Yeah.
And I think he was talking about that in his own way.
Yeah.
I think music too is an embodied experience, whereas words are intellectual and your mind is analyzing, is that true? Is that not true? Do I agree with it? That's all an intellectual experience and not terribly embodied. But because music doesn't have a lot of intellectual content for most people. Now for you might hear it and you go, oh, that's an interesting chord change and that's an interesting modulation. But you know, the average person just experiences it and it brings us into our body. I mean, that's why we dance when music is played.
Exactly. Well, so I want to give you an example of something though that has I want to play you an example of something. So one of the things I do in my workshops, I'm going to share the screen and just show you an example of this. So with respect to what you were just talking about, Anodea, what I really love is interfacing between how music changes the way we engage in cognitive experiences. Now, just listen for a minute. And so how does this music change what we want to say to one another? If we want to talk, right? It's almost like the riffraff of our minds isn't as interested in being said in the space. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, something sacralizing happens. Mm-hmm. And this is the great practice that I think human beings, if I may be so bold, it's one of my contributions to what I want to leave behind is how we can practice cognitive engagement and absorption more effectively with the heart being at the basis of everything we say. At least that it's integrated into it, right? So listen, I just want to hear now you guys. What wants to be said by you at this moment, Anodea? Just at this second moment, right now, this moment.
I don't want to say anything. I want to listen.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I choose like poems, like Rumi or Mary Oliver or Hafiz, or because you don't have to worry about coming from the highest frequency that you want. But it's great to practice. Like, for example, I've been doing a lot of mentoring work with a wonderful group called Legendary Mentoring and Coaching. And they do this exercise in the beginning of their workshop where they pair off and they now I'll look at you, Michael. I don't know you, but I use the music and I'll say, the greatness I see in you is a being who is deeply committed to a world that works for everyone. The greatness I see in you, Anodea, is a tireless servant to the awakening of humanity. I love you. I see you. I honor you. And I'm with you. You know, so it end up creates, so like what would you say with this music here as an opportunity to drop into a deeper level of sharing something that your heart might want to say?
I feel this music creates the field that Rumi talks about that is beyond right and wrongdoing, where we can meet.
And it just for me, listening to it, just feel myself open up. Organ, my heart. I think that's concept of
So, Michael, speak a little louder. We're losing you. Say it again.
Oh, so for me, as I'm listening, it's I feel not so much thoughts as just the bodily experience of opening up my heart, my pores, my cells. It's just an expansion of who I am. Kind of like I got to just use the term the field. So my own field expanding and elevating and resonating with vibrational intelligence.
And wouldn't you say that having a little bit of this experience each day for masses of people anywhere in the world, like it would become a thing, like instead of flossing our teeth, instead of just flossing our teeth, we get to floss our spirits and our hearts with one another. By one beautiful statement of appreciation and acknowledgement, with this music sacralizing and creating a sacred sanctuary, supporting, being the wind under the heart wind under our wings, revitalizes us into a remembrance of who we are and what matters most. And a lot of what the music that I do, now the other thing I do is slow down. I mean, you take the music slowly. And then you let the silence feel the effects of the practice of listening. And you notice, how is it different without the music? And there's a revelation there that's profound to me. Because when we get sensitive to what changes when the music goes away, we're developing our capacity to feel resonance. And to honor resonance, because we're not just jumping into the next conversation. We're feeling the effects of our practice of being in our heart together while we're talking, which is rare.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say more than feeling the resonance, it's entering into the resonance. And that is entering a larger field.
Yeah.
You know, I love what sound waves do when they enter into resonance. They add up. So the distance between the peaks and valleys, the amplitude gets bigger every time you add a note. You add a voice singing the same note. That's why it gets louder. So that means the field deepens when things are resonating together. And when they're not in resonance, they break up our consciousness into fragmentation.
Yes. Right. No, and the other thing, the other reason why I love that you said that, Anodea, and the other reason why I'm obsessed with the exploration of the interface between spoken word and music is because we have been subliminally entrained and conditioned to respond like Pavlovian dogs because of 120 years of movie scores. We don't realize what it's done to us, but we're subliminally aware of being energetically coaxed with manipulative tools that are highly developed, textures and emotions and genres and all musical, that prompt you into a deeper absorption of what the director wants you to feel in that moment, right? Just think about the
And you know this because you scored movies.
That's my whole career. Yeah. In fact, what prepared me for doing Graceful Passages as a work to help alleviate and minimize and decrease anxiety around serious life-threatening illnesses and death is my film scoring history, right? Which is using music. Because there's never been any monetizing principle to do this. I'm the only idiot that's done it because there was no monetizing principle, but it has touched 1 million people thus far. So I'm glad I did it. But when you think about what film scoring really is, and what could it be done to applying to the alleviating of trauma, to the creation of peace, to the alleviating of wounds, to the actual connecting of relationships that are on the skids. The film scoring art is an esoteric subliminal cultivation tool that can actually shape human emotion towards that beautiful arc of justice is long, but it always, that wonderful phrase I always misquote.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah. But I think that the music can be designed to help that arc of justice get closer to the light. And we are not using the skill except for entertainment. And that's what my whole thing is about. Wisdom of the World Wellness is all about helping to weave together this accelerated way of bringing our natural propensity for empathy and connection to one another to be more felt palpably by our awareness of being together and the miracle that life is, you know? So don't get me started. I get all excited.
We do have a couple comments that come in that I want to honor the people who have written in. Denise from New York says, I experienced this when improvising in dance and movement with or without music. It is a process of surrender where impulses, emotions, energy, etc., are expressed through my heart and body.
Beautiful. And that, yeah, and Anodea and are part of the dance community in the Northern California area, where it's just part of my life's nourishment is dancing. And it's hard to do it as powerfully as without music. But yeah, you're right. There is a kind of music to the body's freedom to be expressed. And that's really well put.
Yeah. And then Keith says, I understand completely. I write poetry that could only be enhanced by your music in the background.
Well, yeah, go ahead and download some of that and see how it works with your poetry and see how that flows for you. That'll be fun to see.
I want to, take it down a frequency a little bit and get into the subject of grief. Yeah. Because you've worked a lot with grief, both in dying and also even in the birthing process. And you talk about, that we have denied grief in this culture and there's a cost to that. And music can often bring that stuff up from the heart. And so what would you say about, what do you have to say about unassimilated grief and why it's so dangerous?
We are living in arguably the time of greatest unassimilated grief in the history of the world, especially with all the people that were affected by not being able to be at the bedside of loved ones who died during COVID.
That's right.
What we understand, Stephen Jenkinson's does beautiful work about we're all spiritual orphans because we're not honoring and including our ancestors in our ability to, the way the third world countries or Mexico, for example, and the Day of the Dead, and there's so much more explicit awareness of including death as a part of life. But the problem with the perfect storm we're in is we live in a culture that's so youth focused and afraid of the dying, illness, the end of life process, grief, loss. It's all subjugated, right? And as a result of that, what I've noticed for me is when I'm experiencing unassimilated grief, the signal between me and my purpose gets completely shut down. Because I'm in the middle of something that's keeping me from having the catharsis necessary to awaken to accepting the cycle of life that is nobody can ever stop. And the last I've heard, the death statistic is still 1 per person. I don't think you've heard of any difference since then. It's a joke.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, 1 per person.
So what I talked about earlier about the use of film score music to set to messages that are highly spiritually mature about the acceptance of the cycle of life, when it's shared with someone who's in that loop of denial and avoidance and fear, what happens is they are so completely often ready to have a huge cry and realize, oh my God, this is happening. And the appropriate response is, if depending on the phase of the operation you're in, showing up with gratitude and presence for what's actually happening. I mean, this is why Ram Dass said that graceful passages is not for the people who are dying, because although many, many people who have been dying have used it, it's for all the people surrounding the dying that are so afraid and so constipated with emotion that they create an expectation field that makes the person who's dying feel so uncomfortable and guilty about the natural flow of dying that they resist it. And what we know and what you resist persists. So it's actually a horrendous atrocity on the people that are dying or going through even a life-threatening phase and having all this fear laid onto them in the field. But if you can prepare yourself and listen to graceful passages before you visit someone who's in an unknown place of whether they're going to survive or not, or if they're even dying and you know they are, and they're in the days and weeks and months at the end of a process. Who you show up to be when you're inflamed with the confidence of the cycle of life, and the appropriate response is gratitude and presence and compassion. And oh my God, I'm so grateful for everything you've given me. And instead of all this energy being put in, no, let's not talk about it. It would change the world. And here's the last thing I'll say, and this is the reason why on this subject. When you are directly and more than cognitively aware of your impermanence, it's really hard to willfully hurt another person when you realize how precious life is. Mm-hmm. And you know, the Bhagavad Gita has a quote, a paraphrase section that says, what is the most remarkable thing in all of the world? And in the Bhagavad Gita, forgive my paraphrase, it says, the most remarkable thing in all of the world is that each of us would die, but none of us ever thinks it will happen to us. 5,000 years ago, human nature is still pretty much the same.
And while we have this denial of death, we're creating a lot of it. You know, we're rendering huge millions of species extinct. We've got 400 million guns in the US and mass shootings almost every day. We have a virus that killed off people. We have a war going on in Ukraine. I mean, we keep courting death at the same time that we're in denial about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it creates more grief, more trauma, and it just becomes a self-perpetuating cycle.
Yeah. No, that's why, you know, if we had more time, I'd play a section from Graceful Passages, because with or without the words, there's something, you know, Dean Radin from the Noetic Sciences, the researcher, I once played him the music only from Graceful after he heard one with the words. And like, these words were extemporaneous. They were improvised by the thought leader, which was Ram Dass, Thich Nhat Hanh, Elisabeth Kubler Ross, Rabbi Zalman Schachter, and others. And then I wrote the music like a film score. What would make us feel what they're saying, right? That's how that was created. When you take the words away, we don't have the science to understand this, but Dean Radin said, someday we're going to understand what it means to program or watermark emotional energies, nuanced, discrete emotional energies into music itself. Mm-hmm. Because when you listen to this music only, and it was inspired by the spoken word messages that these thought leaders said, damned if you listen to it, the energy and the intention and the emotion are watermarked into the music in some mysterious way that we don't understand yet. But this is why you can play the music and get the message, whether he says it or whether you hear the words or not. It's a phenomenon and it's magical, and I love it.
Can we hear that piece of music?
I can hear a piece of it. I don't know how much time do we have. Can we?
I don't have time. And then, yeah? You know, usually at the top of the hour, we start taking more questions from people that are listening.
Here, let me, I'll play the one that is the most famous for that purpose. And it's the opening track to Graceful Passages. Where are we? Here it is. Here. And I won't play the whole thing, but I'll give you a taste of it. And what's remarkable about this track is that when you're in a phase of your life, most young people under 30 who have not been exposed to death very much, that it's just not a part of your world, you can listen to it and think, oh, that's pretty, that's nice. You know, all you have to do is actually go through the initiation of either being near someone you love or care about who's close to death or is dying, that this suddenly has great resonance with you. And invariably, people start to cry. So just imagine, as a way to cultivate what I call the spiritual maturity that is derived from accepting the cycle of life, including death, just allow yourself to just close your eyes, because it's better not to look at anything, and just listen to this track. And I'll play, forgive me as I fade it away. I'm not going to have you play the whole thing because it's about 7 minutes and that's too long, I think, for this. But here we go. I'm so excited you asked me to share this. It's one of my favorite pieces. Okay, here we go. Oh, shit. Sorry, hold on. Okay. this spacious music. Breathe. Feel the ground under your feet. Be the master of your state change. Presence. Compassion. Gratitude.
No one has ever prepared us for this experience. We think it's the end. No. It's another beginning. Another beginning. It's knowing that you're loved. Knowing that you're loved. It's not easy letting yourself be loved. Of course, we've learned to judge ourselves. And we're always judging ourselves. But I learned to listen, that I was loved. I was loved. And then I would forget that I was loved. Those were the most painful times for me. Forgetting that I was loved. So you've let yourself be loved while you've been here? And you've judged yourself? And you've forgotten that you were loved? And you became alone? But you will always be here. You are blessed. You are forgiven. You are an angel. You have to listen that you're loved. And you have to forgive all the time. Listen that you're loved.
Yeah. Wow.
Did you notice that he said, but you will always be here? He slipped that in there, and I've heard it 1,000 times, and I've never seemed to be amazed. That is such a provocative sentence. But you will always be here. I find that to be fascinating to ponder that, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like I just had a massage.
I was just thinking, instead of kids in school every morning having to say the Pledge of Allegiance, that's what they should be listening to every morning.
or the child development equivalent, right? That's I've always been interested in. You know, I saw an article once that fascinated me, and I keep on wanting to actually check this out. And someone did verify it was real. There was an article in a Far East newspaper that talked about the fact that Taiwan was developing new programs of learning around children uh, understanding grief as a part of life from the earliest age, like when kindergarten and they had a toy destroyed, that they have a process that gives them a chance to honor that it was lost. And then age developmentally, it goes up so that people were more prepared for death and grief as a part of life. And I've never gotten a full confirmation on it, but when I looked at it, my eyes popped out of my face. I just went, could you imagine a culture, a world culture that had it as part of the emotional intelligence spectrum, was what I call loss literacy, the ability to cultivate, assimilate, and make peace with the losses of our lives. It would be a different world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's another comment that just came in from Keith. Gary, I once played that first track over and over as I fell asleep, and it took me into higher dimensions. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that has been the most beautiful blessing of my life, hearing thousands of people who have been impacted by this experience that we created, Michael and Doris and I. Yeah, I'm so grateful for that. There's going to be a new e-version that we're going to be putting online that doesn't exist yet. That'll be out by the end of the year. So I'm excited.
How would people find that?
Well, wisdomoftheworld.com. If you sign up for my newsletter, and you get all kinds of gifts if you do. There'll be news about that, and we'll be sharing that when it comes on.
Yeah, I just put the website in there.
Thank you.
I was, as we've been talking and playing music, I reminded myself of the Steven Spielberg film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and it was the music that was the connection between the aliens who landed,
right.
humans. Yeah, they were putting it together, and then they finally connected when the whole thing. I can't even fully remember the movie. I remember it was almost like a symphony coming out of the spaceship. But we don't need aliens to come and give us the song, the answers. We have it right here with our own resonance and heart open.
It is a universal language.
Yeah. And
well,
Gary.
Go ahead, Michael.
Gary, you also differentiate between wisdom and knowledge, so and music's role in wisdom. But I wonder if you might say more on that.
I really want us, the Evolutionary Leaders Circle and the Association for Transformational Leaders, and all the people that are involved in the proliferation of consciousness. I really want to, this whole idea of this movement called.
Oh, you just froze.
Oh.
Gary, you just froze. Uh-oh.
He's sharing his computer sound. Oh, Gary's gone off to a higher dimension right now. Oh.
Well, we'll read from Nina. You froze there for a moment, Gary. Are you back? You froze mid-sentence.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Mid-sentence, so start over.
I want is for the leaders of consciousness to have a nuanced reclamation of wisdom being a direct experience of spirit, a direct experience of heart coherence, a direct experience of the quantum field. And the yada yada just will not stand any longer. I mean, it just, and it still exists in a lot of the consciousness circles. We're still deeply seduced by the power of our intellectual capacities. But honestly, I mean, I remember the Michael Lerner, the famous rabbi, Tikkun magazine, and I recorded him for, I have like 400 or 500 hours of 120 thought leaders who have spoken in a way that is more of what I'm talking about. Instead of being interviewed for knowledge, I'm asking them to speak from the heart of their tenderness as an offering to someone whose life depended upon what they were about to say. When I recorded Jean Houston, and she was doing this, if not you, now, if not who, and if not now, when, and, they're so intimidating, And I went, Jean, I just know millions of people that would love to just hear the tender mother in you, take them through a dark forest of our time, and just like a little child, that reclaim our innocence by allowing ourselves to be loved as a mother, right? She went, you want that? I went, if you would. And I have one of the rare recordings of Jane Houston speaking from this place of tenderness that I believe is one of the hallmarks of the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Now, it doesn't mean that wisdom has to be tender, but it's like tender is a branch of the tree of presence. That's Angeles Arian talked about the 9 arms of love. All these expressions of love are expressions of what I would define as what wisdom is. And I feel like we've gone astray, even in the spiritual communities, by giving lip service to watching thoughts and calling it meditation, rather than heart-centered mindfulness, embodied mindfulness that actually allows you to feel heartbroken while you're meditating. This is the kind of wisdom that I feel we need now. And I think that music has a role to play in awakening that.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Well, I know also I want to get in about Can You Hear Me Baby, the musical you've been writing, before we open the questions up to the people who have been listening. And some people have written some things into the chat, which I'll read in a moment. But, you wrote graceful passages for people in the dying process, and now you're writing a musical about birth.
Well, because when I was approached in 2009 by Lisa Raffel, the spiritual teacher and shamanic sound healer, and her husband, Dr. David Sorenda, they were starting to recognize that their children were, they were relating to their grandchildren and realizing that grandparents are very unique because they have the time to just be loving with none of the responsibilities, right? So Lisa started coming up with these lullabies. And I said, we should create a book and CD set to deepen the bonding process. So we came up with a book called Safe in the Arms of Love, Deepening the Essential Bond with Your Baby. And you can get it by going to lisaraffel.com. I'll put it on the chat. But then we did that and we got it. It was a book and CD set around bonding. And then we did a CD for prenatal bonding. And then they moved to Kripalu area, and David was the CEO of Kripalu for a while. And we did a play at the Berkshire Women's Writers Festival. And that was about songs and stories around the miracle of life and bonding and birthing and all that. 8 years later, we got a full-on original musical play that we hope will go to Broadway. And we're going to have our big event on August 13th to raise money for our very first official workshop. We've done staged readings in New York, in upstate New York, and in Massachusetts. And now we're ready to take it to the big time and attract a real big time director and producer. And it's very exciting. And it was ironic because writing this musical for me and Lisa actually it brought up all of our healing issues around our own bonding problems in our childhood, in our infancy, in our birthing. We got into some serious projection issues in our relationship that we suddenly realized we were being worked so that we could create something that would have even greater relevance by using our own woundings to figure out how to create songs about it. So it's been a very fascinating process, but I am so happy to say that we are done with all the songs and we're ready to take it to the next step. So Can You Hear Me Baby will be a website at some point. There is one, but it's based on the old version, canyouhearmebaby.com, which gives you an idea of where it was 7 years ago. But again, lisaraffel.com and wisdomoftheworld.com will give you all the latest information on the development of that musical. And if anyone in the audience loves creating new musicals and has a few $100,000 to contribute, be sure to let us know.
You could use that. Well, should we open it up to questions from the participants?
Yeah.
This is so fun, by the way. Thank you so much for.
This is
so great to talk with you guys about all this.
Yeah.
And while people are writing in their questions, there are some comments that have come up. Nina from Syracuse says, I've often wondered how known musicians in a Holocaust camp were compelled to play as their friends' family were hoarded into the gas chambers. Ooh. The effect, did it ever change the guards or the musicians?
Yeah, that's
Do you know anything about that?
Well, I know the chant that is most famous for what they sang as they were walking to the gas chambers. It's one of the most hauntingly beautiful Hebraic melodies I've ever heard in my life. I have no comment. other
Yeah.
than I scored a film called Raising the Ashes that it's really worth looking for. It's called Raising the Ashes. You can find it on IMDb or somewhere. And it was about a multi-faith retreat held by Reverend Zen Master Bernie Glassman, directed by Michael O'Keefe. And it was about a multi-faith retreat to heal the humanities wounds that's projected onto Germany that lives in the place at Auschwitz. And it was very powerful film that I had the great opportunity to score in 1997 or 8. But I actually think I had a past life at Auschwitz or something like that, because I've had a lot of that kind of conversation just gets me very quiet inside because
Denise also writes, addictions abort the process of grief that is often the result of or connected to trauma. Addictions thrive where there is a lack of connection, safety, and emotional honesty. When people get help with their addictions, unprocessed grief is a huge part of the healing process. The language of the heart is essential to this process. Yeah.
wow, if it's all right with you, Denise, I'd like to take that and share it if I could with people. And I want to write down your last name so I can properly credit you. That's beautifully articulated and just couldn't agree with you more. Lovely.
And then Vineet says, I'd love to hear you describe vibrational intelligence and how to optimize that in our daily life.
And spoken from one of my closest friends on the planet. Hi, Vineet. So one of the greatest ways to cultivate vibrational intelligence is to start developing a relationship to your singing voice, no matter what it sounds like. Your capacity to use even humming. You feel the vibration of your lips. You sing in the shower. You sing in the car. You sing. Singing is a cleansing, like listening, is a cleansing practice that refines our capacity to be in alignment with other vibrational fields. And that's one thing. The other thing is using music to support your environment that allows you to slow down and use the music as training wheels for you to become aware of how the mind wants to race ahead in every moment. And as a wounded healer, I know this more intimately than most people because I'm running fast and doing too much and overcommitting. So one of the great ways, and self-serving, is a lot of the music that I've been focused on creating these last few years is music that is for that purpose. There's a particular album on my website called All Is Well, and the other one is called Autumn Stillness or Winter Faith. These are all three of those albums are actually resonance cultivation tools, because what they do is they slow you down, but it's instead of it being music that from the composer, the implicit message from the composer is, listen to me, listen to how clever my music is, listen to all the inventiveness my music is, right? There's a inherent subliminal energy, and I'm sure I have it too in all the music I've done. It's in every person's music, right? But it's less there when its purpose is to design a way to help you listen to you. Fundamental difference. So what happens is you play spacious music like I was playing before, and it's so spacious that it lends you to sharpen your resonance consciousness apparatus. It sharpens your tool for sensing that which you are resonant with, because you become more in alignment with where you are on the frequency spectrum of emotional resonance. It's just an instant way to slow down and drop yourself into your heart and feel the nuance of who's resonating with who and how and why. And it's just slowing down is in the heart is a very essential way. And honestly, the best and most effective way to cultivate vibrational intelligence is to feed as much nature exposure as you possibly can. Yeah. There's nothing that can come close to the original healer, which is Mother Earth, which Vineet knows better than most people I know, who's in love with, he's married to her.
He's a lover of nature also. Yeah.
He is. He is. And he understands how nature heals. That, nature deficit disorder is a diagnosed thing now.
That's right.
That children in the inner cities just bring them out into nature for a week and it transforms them, for a while at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, Gary, talking about music in the world and crises, the politicians and leaders are mainly lawyers or engineers or just professionals in that logical realm, and it's very rare that we have an artist or a musician as a leader politician. But that's we need more.
I find it. I come from Ukrainian Jewish blood. My family comes from the Ukraine. And I find it interesting. Zelensky was an actor.
Yeah, right.
And he was an artist at heart, a comedian and an actor and a performer. So I find that very interesting that one of the most respected leaders of courage and heroism today has his roots in performance, which is fascinating, isn't it?
I heard a YouTube of him singing with his wife. Beautiful harmonies.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They had made that before the war, of course, but
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, one of the great statesmen of over the last number of decades was Václav Havel,
right?
The man of letters, who became the leader of the Czech Republic and helped to lead them to a new paradigm, a new world.
Yeah.
There's no revolution without music.
Yeah.
Well, no, and the idea of allowing the arts to play a critical role, like this whole STEM versus STEAM conversation. I'm seeing STEM advertised on television these days: science, technology, engineering, and math. But you add STEAM, you add the A, it's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And what I've said that I really love, I've been saying this for years, and it's a great way to describe it, if I do say so myself, I call the arts are not the garnish, the parsley on the main course of life, the main course being, healthcare and medicine and finance and government and all the mature, manly things that are happening, unfortunately, with mostly white men. The arts are the digestive enzyme that enables us to withdraw, to absorb the meaning in the main course, that actually creates the reasons for why we're alive and what humanity is all about. And without having the STEM have an A in it, and so without being STEAM, we miss the point of human engagement. And many people have told me who are very familiar with the AI movement, the artificial intelligence, that all of the last 50 years of revelations in the philosophers and the New Age writings that we're all familiar with because of the consciousness shifts that have gone on in the last 50 years from well, we all know, Stan Grof and Wilhelm Reich and Eric Erickson and all the original pioneers, right? What someone told me is all of that information all the way up through now is not being reflected in the artificial intelligence transfer.
Yeah.
It's all been based on, and even Wikipedia censors anything that includes more like integrative health stuff. They actually wouldn't let Deepak talk about integrative health at one of the TED Talks in West Hollywood. I mean, this is what we're up to, is a misappropriation and a corruption of what it means to be human by reducing it to, I think, therefore I am. Give me a break.
Yeah.
I am, therefore I think and feel and sense, and right?
And the arts are the first thing to get cut in the school budget. And I think they're the most important thing we can teach our children.
Well, as a delivery system, as an awakening tool, and as a humanizing catalyst, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So we can say in most of the European countries, developed nations, the arts are very important, and there's much great funding for them.
Exactly. Yeah. So Ken Robinson, I noticed Denise. Wow. Denise, you got it going on. Whoever you are, you're pretty informed, darling. So thank you for your wonderful comments, and Yeah, it's nice. What if the little drones released playing music over the fighters? Oh, wow. And I dreamed I saw the bombers riding shotguns in the sky, and they were turning into butterflies above our nation, right?
Yeah, we are stardust.
Yeah, we are Stardust. Yeah.
Yeah.
PJ
Yeah.
Hirabayashi said, with heartful gratefulness, thank you for your creative wisdom.
Mm. You know,
Yeah.
there's a piece of music. I don't know if we have the time to play it, but it's the last piece I wrote for the Thrive second sequel, the Thrive film, and I love playing it because it's based on the theory that how can we create heaven on earth if we don't actually practice vibrating at that frequency?
That's right.
Because we create at the rate which we vibrate, right? That makes perfect sense. We create at the rate at which we vibrate. So I have a piece of music, might be 4 minutes, might be too long,
Well,
but
maybe it's a good way to wrap up. So I don't
Yeah.
see any more questions coming in, and it's about time to wrap up. So maybe finish with a piece of music.
and then we can talk about just briefly how it made you feel at the end of it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Let me play this.
Yeah.
It's fun because, again, this idea that listening together. This is why the other title that I'm considering turning vibrational intelligence in is called the listening fire, because I've been doing these listening experiences on these global coherence pulses with Teresa Collins from the Global Coherence Pulse and the Islands of Coherence Mighty Network that she has. And what I learned is that we can use listening as a tool to reconnect the primordial connection we have with one another. The way, like, you know, when you're around a campfire and you feel you're not talking a lot, right? You're around a fire and there's something so compelling about just being together watching that fire, right? Well, listening has a similar impact. And so that's how I want you to listen to this piece of music, is as if we're sitting around a fire, imagining together. Science of love, where is it? Science of, are you there? Where are you? All right, hold on. All right, I will find it a better way. But, you know, it's just this idea of, hold on, Thrive, where are you? Sorry about this. Thrive soundtracks. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So this idea that, imagine as we're listening to this, that we're actually around a fire, but it's a virtual fire. And so make believe that together, you know, when two or more are present, we magnify. It's like what you said, Anodea, about that adding more of the same note, and it adds this deeper depth and power to the wave, right? So let's all magnify the wave of the possibility that love has triumphed over evil. Or you can think about it as, what do you want your life to feel like in 5 years or a year, or your relationship, or just pick anything and work it as we're around this listening fire. Okay. And I'm so excited to share this with you. It's the last cue in Thrive. And it was the hardest cue for me to write because it was when the world was going to hell in a handbasket. And it was really hard for me to find a positive energy in myself. But here we go.
Hmm.
So,
Wow.
so write in the chat, people who are here, how that made you feel, or just love to hear your thoughts on Anodea and Michael.
I remember when you were writing that.
Oh,
I'll tell
that,
you, what happened? I couldn't come up with it for the longest time. And it was during the Biden Trump election, and it was during the COVID, and it was during this horrible time. And I couldn't find it in me. And I knew that I had to do something extraordinary. So I started sleeping an hour extra a day. I started becoming a vegetarian again. I walked an hour every day, and I just changed my diet, and I just did everything different. And finally, in about 10 days, my vibrational frequency was capable of intuiting what that music needed to be. But it was really hard to do when I wasn't taking care of myself.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was just pure heart and soul and spirit. And we have a few people giving their feedback too.
Yeah.
I love what Denise, my God, who this Denise is. She's like so keyed into what we're doing today. It's beautiful. I love what you wrote. Heart bursting love and wonder, magic, light, a childlike, heart expansive adventure where I soar and fly over the planet, witnessing beautiful plants and animals and loving humans. I love that. And one of the things I love that you said this, Denise, all of this vibrational intelligence, you can't not include the reclaiming of our innocence,
Yeah.
Hmm.
the
And the,
play.
and the child within.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's such an important part.
So Vineet says soaring. Keith said it lifted me. Thank you. Triumphant with love. The possibility of unity in it from Susan. Essential. Cheryl says thank you for such an expansive journey.
Expansive. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about that movie, which is, I call it the most important conversation starter. You don't necessarily agree with everything that it said, but it's the best conversation starter in the world. And just check that out, and you should see it. It's really great for evaluating what you think would make the world for everybody to thrive. So I recommend it highly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been so wonderful. Are you guys just
Oh,
you're
Gary.
lucky to I now it makes me want to see all the past interviews you've done, because this has
Oh,
really been so
yeah.
fun to be in your hands.
Yeah, well,
we'll
yours
have
will be among them. And where are they located again, Michael? Archive?
give me a moment. I'll pull it up and then I'll put the link in.
And by the way, if anyone in the audience has a healthcare institution or a corporate environment that wants to create coherence and everything, I love coming as a visitor, as either a keynote speaker or a workshop provider or whatever. So please go to Gary, wisdomoftheworld.com, or Gary at wisdomoftheworld.com, and let me know how I can serve you or your community. I would be honored and delighted.
Okay, I'm putting the
Anita said
link.
binaural beats sent goosebumps, and I hummed along and skipped, and I am happy. Yeah, beautiful, uplifting. I really love your chord changes. Your chord changes just kind of that's what does it for me. The rhythm and the chord changes. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Oh, I want to
just
grab
put
this.
the link in.
Okay.
We'll have to have you on again, Gary, because we could talk a long time and on very profound and important and expansive topics.
Well, and I want the opportunity to interview you for when I'm starting a series. Right now it's just going to be monthly. It's called Wisdom Keeper Series. And the first one's going to be hopefully in the fall, September. I'm thinking I'm going to interview Foster Gamble as I release the 2 soundtrack albums for Thrive. So, but I'm going to have a guest once a month, just starting small. But so
Great.
I want to have the kind of fun you're having interviewing all these amazing people. I think that sounds like a lot of fun.
It is fun. And this particularly was wonderful fun.
Yeah.
And I think it's been an hour and a half, so we should probably wrap it up and let people go. But most people have stayed through to the end. And I just want to thank you so much, Gary, for your intelligence, your depth, your breadth, your heart-centered frequency, your resonance, for bringing us all into a different state. And it's just been delightful.
Yeah. Well, go back at you both. I mean, it's been such a pleasure. Michael, were you about to say?
Oh, I was going to say that just logistically that this has been recorded, so it'll go on the website where all the interviews are. And if you want, Gary, I can send it to you. But everyone listening and all the people on our list will get the recording too. So for people who weren't able to make it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you. Much success with this series and for all your work. And Anodea, I adore you. And ever since you came out with your book about the global heart, I knew that you and I were working for the same boss. And I still have great designs for creating content that will accelerate people's understanding of what the global heart even means. So one day, what I want to do when I grow up is to do that with you.
All right. Well, one day that will happen, because it warms my heart as well just to think about it.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you for the honor of being able to talk to you all and to your audience. And it was a pleasure. It was really enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody that's listening, and we'll send out the recording in a few days. And thank you again, Gary, and thank you all the people that came on.
Thank
Hail
you.
and farewell.
All right. Peace out.